Get the owner on the phone now. Serena's scream sliced through the restaurant air. Every head in the place swiveled. I was sitting in my corner booth, nursing a half-finished cup of coffee, when my daughter-in-law stormed into the main dining room. She was clinging to my son Marcus's arm, surrounded by her gaggle of stylish friends. Serena was draped in a blood-red designer dress that screamed money, and enough jewelry to make her glitter under the crystal chandeliers. Then she spotted me, and her face contorted into a mask of pure disgust. What in God's name is this old woman doing here? The words spewed from her mouth like poison, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. I felt every pair of eyes burning into me. My worn gray cardigan, my sensible shoes, my hair pulled back in a simple bun. I was a stain on their perfect evening. Marcus hurried over, his face flushed, not with anger at his wife's treatment of me, but with pure embarrassment. "Mom," he hissed through gritted teeth. "What are you doing in a place like this? Look at what you're wearing. My God, this is humiliating." My own son, my only child. The words stung, hitting me right in the chest, but I kept my composure. My hands trembled ever so slightly around my coffee cup, but I didn't say a word. Serena was already snapping her fingers at the waitstaff, her voice growing louder and shriller. "I need the manager now. This woman doesn't belong here. This is a high-end establishment, not a soup kitchen. Get her out of here immediately." Murmurs rippled through the room. Elegant couples at nearby tables watched us with a mixture of morbid curiosity and blatant disapproval. Some of the women looked at me with pity, others with disdain, as if my very presence was tainting the refined atmosphere. Marcus and Serena's friends were trying and failing to stifle their snickers. One of them muttered something about people who don't know their place. Marcus leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "Mom, please. We're here with important investors. You're going to ruin everything. Can't you just leave? There are cheap diners over on the north end. Go there." Investors, important people. It was always the same song and dance. I was never enough for them, never stylish enough, modern enough, or valuable enough. Serena continued to wave her arms around dramatically, her voice reaching almost hysterical levels. "This is completely unacceptable. We pay a fortune to dine in an exclusive atmosphere, and this shows up? Where is the owner? I want to speak to the owner right now." She pointed at me as if I was a piece of trash that needed immediate disposal. Her friends nodded in agreement, completely scandalized, whispering amongst themselves about the nerve of some people. A young server nervously approached, trying to defuse the situation, but Serena cut him off before he could even speak. "I don't want excuses. I want the manager. I want the owner. Someone needs to answer for this." The poor kid practically ran toward the back offices. Marcus was avoiding eye contact with me completely, focusing on plastering a tight smile on his face and aiming it at his investors, desperately trying to minimize the whole incident. I just remained sitting there, feeling like all 66 years of my life had been distilled down to this one moment of complete and utter humiliation. My own son wanted to erase me from his existence. The seconds ticked by like hours. Serena was using every single one to add fuel to the fire. "I just can't believe it, can you? You come to celebrate, to close important deals, and you have to run into this situation." She probably snuck in without a reservation, or worse, someone took pity on her and let her in. Her friends all laughed. That cruel, familiar laughter of women who get their kicks from stepping all over others. One of them chimed in. "Poor dear. She probably saw the place from outside and thought she could pretend to belong here." The laughter grew even louder. Just then Tony Davis appeared. The restaurant manager walked toward us with his usual air of calm elegance, impeccable suit, perfect posture, and a professional smile that gave absolutely nothing away. Serena pounced on him immediately. "Finally. I need you to get this woman out of here immediately. She's ruining everyone's dining experience. Just look at what she's wearing. It's an embarrassment to your establishment." Tony listened in silence, just nodding slightly, his expression remaining completely neutral. Then his eyes settled on me. For just a fleeting second, something flickered in his gaze. Something that Serena, lost in her moment of perceived power, completely missed. Marcus chimed in, trying to sound authoritative. Look, we don't want to make a bigger scene. Just handle this discreetly. Take her out through the kitchen exit if you have to. Through the kitchen, as if I was garbage that didn't even deserve to use the front door. Tony took a deep breath and then, with a composure that was in stark contrast to Serena's hysteria, he turned to face me completely. His next words dropped like a bomb into the expectant silence of the restaurant. Madam Proprietor, how would you like me to proceed with these patrons? Proprietor. The word hung heavy in the air. I watched as Serena's expression froze solid. Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief, and the murmurs abruptly ceased. Tony waited for my answer with complete respect, his hands clasped in front of him, his posture almost reverent. I still hadn't moved a muscle. My coffee was now cold between my trembling fingers. 66 years old, widowed for 5 years. A lifetime spent building something my own children knew absolutely nothing about. And there I was in my restaurant being treated like an inconvenience by the family I had given everything to. The silence that followed was deafening. Proprietor. That word just kept echoing in the air like a ringing bell. I saw Serena blinking rapidly, her mouth opening and closing without making a sound. Marcus had gone pale, losing at least 3 shades, his hand gripping the back of a nearby chair as if he needed physical support to stay upright. The investors exchanged confused glances. Serena's friends had stopped laughing. Tony was still standing by my table, awaiting my instructions with the loyalty that can only come from years of working together and having mutual respect. But I still couldn't speak. I had a knot in my throat the size of a fist, because this moment, this public humiliation at the hands of my own flesh and blood, was simply the culmination of 5 years of accumulated disrespect. 5 years ago, when I lost my husband, I also lost my identity in my son's eyes. Robert Ropp had been my partner for 42 years. Together we had built everything from scratch. We arrived in this city with nothing but dreams and a willingness to work hard. He cooked and I managed. Our first restaurant was just a tiny little space in a neglected part of the North End. We worked 16 hours a day, every single day. Marcus grew up among the tables and in the kitchen, doing his homework amidst the aroma of spices and the clatter of dishes. But he never valued that. To him we were just restaurant people, service workers. Nothing glamorous, nothing to brag about to his fancy private university friends. When Rob died suddenly of a massive heart attack, I was devastated, of course. But I was also left with something that Marcus never knew about. A chain of 7 upscale dining establishments scattered all across the city. What started as that humble neighborhood spot had transformed into a culinary empire valued at several $1 million. Rob and I had worked quietly, reinvesting every single profit, expanding strategically, but we never flaunted it. We never lived in mansions. We stayed in our modest little house in the North End, where we had started. We continued to dress simply. The money was in the businesses, in property, in investments, not in appearances. After the funeral, Marcus showed up with Serena. They had been married for 2 years by then, but the wake was the first time that she showed me her true colors. While I was crying beside my husband's coffin, I overheard her whispering to one of her friends, "Poor Marcus. Now he's going to have to carry the old woman. She probably can't even afford to keep herself afloat." Those words pierced me like a knife, but I was too deep in grief to confront her. Marcus said nothing. He didn't defend me, he didn't contradict her. He simply nodded with a look of resignation, as if I truly was a burden that he now had to bear. The following months were very revealing. Marcus only visited when he needed cash. "Mom, I have expenses. The condo, the car. Serena wants to redecorate." I always gave him the money, $500 here, $1,000 there. He never asked where the money came from. He just assumed that it was my husband's savings, a small widow's pension. Something small that would eventually run out. I never told him about the restaurants. I don't even know why exactly. Maybe I sensed that knowing the truth would fundamentally change something in our relationship. Maybe I wanted to protect the last thing I had left of Rob. Or maybe deep down, I already knew that my son didn't really love me for who I was, but for what he could get from me. Serena just made everything worse. She came from a family with money, or at least that's what she constantly claimed. Her father had businesses. Her mother organized charity events. Serena had gone to expensive schools and traveled all over Europe. To her, I was just the embarrassing mother-in-law, the poor widow from the humble neighborhood. At family gatherings, she introduced me with thinly veiled disdain. This is Eleanor, Marcus's mother. She lives in the old neighborhood, where they had their little food business. Little business, as if 40 years of hard work were completely meaningless. As if Rob's sweat and sacrifice didn't even deserve a modicum of respect. 2 years ago, my grandson Elias was born, my only grandson. When Serena was pregnant, I knitted blankets, bought clothes, and prepared everything with the joy of a first-time grandmother. On the day of the delivery, I waited for 12 hours straight at the hospital. When they finally let me in, Serena looked at me with obvious annoyance. Only 15 minutes. I'm exhausted, and we have important visitors coming after this. 15 minutes with my own grandson. That was all I got. In the following weeks, I tried to visit them. I brought homemade food, modest little gifts. But Serena always had an excuse ready. We're busy. The baby is sleeping. We have a doctor's appointment. Better another day. Another day that never seemed to come. Marcus eventually stopped returning my phone calls. Messages went unanswered. But I kept insisting, because the pain of not seeing my grandson was eating me up from the inside out. Then one day about 6 months ago, I showed up at their condo unannounced. I rang the doorbell repeatedly. Serena flung the door open, fury blazing in her eyes. What part of "we're busy" don't you understand? That's enough, Eleanor. You're being intrusive, desperate, pathetic. And then she slammed the door right in my face. I could hear Elias crying inside, my grandson. And I was out there, standing on the other side of the door like an unwanted stranger. That night, I cried until I literally ran out of tears. I called Brenda, my lifelong friend. She knew the whole truth. She knew about the restaurants, the properties, everything. Eleanor, Brenda said firmly, you have to stop letting this happen. You are a powerful woman. Stop groveling for crumbs of affection. But I just couldn't. He was my son, my only family. I kept giving him money whenever he asked for it. I kept swallowing my pride every single time that Serena humiliated me. I kept accepting being invisible because I was so afraid of losing them completely. Afraid of being all alone in this world. 3 months ago, Marcus called me. The first time in weeks. My heart leaped with hope. Mom, I need to see you. I thought that they finally wanted to reconcile. I cooked my best meal. I tidied the house until it sparkled. He arrived alone, without Serena, without Elias. He sat down in my small living room, looking around with that air of superiority he had perfected over the years. Mom, I need $5,000. It's urgent. I have investments. I just looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in months. My son, 38 years old, wearing an expensive suit and a watch that probably cost more than my car, coming to ask his poor old mother for money. Investments? I asked softly. Yeah, business stuff. You wouldn't understand. Just tell me if you have it or not. I gave him the money, taking it from the personal account where I kept cash for day-to-day expenses. He took the envelope, didn't even bother to count it, and left without even drinking the coffee that I had made him, without asking how I was feeling, without a hug, without anything. That night, Brenda called me, sounding agitated. Eleanor, you need to know something. My niece works in PR. She saw Marcus and Serena at a corporate event. They were bragging that they're opening their own luxury restaurant, that they have investors lined up, that it's going to be the most exclusive spot in the entire city. My blood ran cold. My money, my years of silent help, all going to finance a dream that completely excluded me. A restaurant that would directly compete with mine, built with my own money, without them even knowing that I was their competition. That's when I decided something had to change. But I wasn't going to say anything just yet. I was going to watch. I was going to see just how far their contempt would go, how far they were willing to push me before I finally revealed the truth. I continued living my simple life, visiting my restaurants discreetly, meeting with Tony and my other managers in private offices. I kept wearing my modest clothes, living in my humble home. But inside something had shifted. The pain was slowly transforming into something colder, harder, more final. And then came this evening. This dinner that was supposed to be a quiet evening. And then this moment, where my own family dragged me through the dirt in front of a room full of strangers. Tony's question was still hanging in the air, just waiting for my answer. I slowly raised my gaze to meet Tony's. I saw the genuine concern in his eyes, the loyalty that came from years of working together. But I also saw something else. He was waiting for me to finally defend myself, to set some boundaries, to stop letting them walk all over me. My voice came out weaker than I would have liked. Tony, please just let them finish their dinner in peace. I was just leaving anyway. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly. I picked up my worn handbag, avoiding everyone's eyes. Tony frowned, clearly disappointed by my answer, but he nodded with professional deference. I walked past Marcus without even looking at him, past Serena, who now looked confused and vaguely triumphant all at the same time. I left the restaurant with my head down, feeling the weight of dozens of pairs of eyes pinned to my back. Outside, the cold night air hit my face. And then finally the tears came. It wasn't even the first time that they had humiliated me. Heaven knows it wasn't. This was simply the last drop that had finally spilled over from a cup that had been silently filling up for years. I remembered that Christmas about 18 months ago, when Serena hosted a family dinner at their condo. She invited me, but only with a set of conditions. Eleanor, please try to look presentable. Marcus's parents, my family will be here too. We don't want them to think that we are, well, you know. She didn't want them to think what? That her husband came from working-class people? That her mother-in-law didn't wear designer clothes? I arrived at that dinner wearing a green sweater that I had bought especially for the occasion. It wasn't expensive, but it was new and it fit me well. I was also carrying a cake that I had baked myself, using my grandmother's recipe. I knocked on the door, my heart full of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe we could finally be a real family. Serena opened the door. She looked me up and down, and her smile tightened just a bit. Oh, you came. As if my presence were a rather unpleasant surprise. Even though she had invited me herself, she let me in, but not into the main dining room where everyone else was. She took me straight to the kitchen. Can you leave the cake here? You should probably wait a moment before going out there. Not everyone has arrived yet. I stood there in that kitchen like an employee waiting for orders. I could hear the sounds of laughter coming from the dining room, the animated conversations. Serena's parents had arrived, her sister, some close friends. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Finally, I just walked out there on my own. When I entered the dining room, the conversation abruptly stopped. Serena practically jumped out of her chair. Eleanor. Oh, so glad you finally came out. Look, I'll introduce you to everyone. She did so with that fake smile that I knew so well. This is Marcus's mother. She lives on the North End. She has a very cozy little house. Cozy little house was just code for insignificant, poor person. Serena's mother, a woman with far too much Botox and an excessive amount of jewelry, looked at me the way one might look at an insect. Oh, how quaint. And then she asked, and what did your husband do? She used the past tense, as if Rob didn't even deserve to be remembered. We had restaurants, I said simply. Serena quickly interrupted. A small restaurant, comfort food, nothing fancy. It's not even around anymore. A complete and utter lie. She didn't even know anything about it, but she still made me seem even more insignificant. The rest of the dinner was just pure torture. They sat me at the far end of the table, as far away from the center of attention as possible. No one even spoke to me. When I tried to contribute to a conversation, Serena abruptly changed the subject. My cake never even left the kitchen. At dessert time, she served a cake that she had bought from some expensive bakery, presenting it as if it were the only dessert of the night. When I said goodbye, Marcus didn't even bother to get up out of his chair. Bye, Mom. Drive safe. That was it. I got home and threw my cake in the trash. I cried over the kitchen sink, wondering just when I had lost my son, when I had become just an embarrassing obstacle, instead of the mother who had given him everything. That night I called Brenda, sobbing uncontrollably. She came over to my house, hugged me tight and let me cry on her shoulder. Eleanor, that's enough. You have to stop them. How long are you going to allow this to continue? But I just couldn't. I kept clinging to the hope that they would change, that one day Marcus would actually remember who had raised him, who loved him unconditionally. Then came Elias's first birthday. My grandson turned 1 year old. Serena posted photos on social media of this elaborate party-themed decorations. A professional dessert table, entertainers, dozens and dozens of guests. And I hadn't even been invited. I didn't even know about the party until I saw the pictures online. My grandson was blowing out his first birthday candles surrounded by complete strangers, and I, his grandmother, was completely excluded. I sent Marcus a text message. I saw the photos from Elias's birthday. He looked beautiful. I wish I could have been there. His reply came about 3 hours later. It was a small party, Mom. Just close family. Close family. I wasn't close family. Those 2 words just broke something deep inside of me. Something that just couldn't be repaired. 2 weeks later, they showed up at my house unannounced. It was a Saturday morning. I was still in my pajamas and my house was definitely untidy. I opened the door in surprise. Marcus just walked right in without even greeting me, looking around with an expression of utter disapproval. Mom, we need to talk to you about something important. Serena followed him inside, carrying Elias. My heart skipped a beat when I saw my grandson. I instinctively reached out my arms. Serena subtly moved away, shielding the baby as if I were some kind of dangerous disease. He's tired. They sat down on my old sofa. Marcus got straight to the point. Mom, Serena and I have been talking, and we need you to understand something. We have busy lives, we have responsibilities, we have a son. We can't be constantly worrying about you. Worrying as if they ever actually had. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Serena sighed dramatically. Eleanor, you're getting older. You live alone. Eventually you're going to need help, you're going to need someone to take care of you. And we just want to make it perfectly clear that we can't be responsible for that. They were planning out my placement in a nursing home. I was only 64 years old at the time. I was perfectly healthy, active, but to them I was already just a future problem that they wanted to solve in advance. I'm fine, I managed to say. I don't need any help. Marcus shook his head. Mom, be realistic. This house is falling apart. Your car is 15 years old. You barely even have enough money to live on. We can't just keep subsidizing you forever. Subsidizing me. Me who had given him thousands upon thousands of dollars over the years. Me who had more money than he would probably ever see in his entire life. But I just remained silent. I kept protecting my secret, as if it were the only shred of dignity that I had left. Serena added with a voice dripping with false sweetness. Besides, when you pass on, we have to think about the practical stuff. This house, your belongings. We just don't want Marcus to have to deal with a big legal mess. They were actually planning out my death, discussing my inheritance right in front of me, as if I were already a ghost. In fact, Serena continued, it would probably be a good idea if you just gave us a copy of your will, just to keep everything in order to avoid any unpleasant surprises. Marcus nodded in agreement. It's just logical, Mom. We're your only family. Elias is your only grandson. Everything you have is going to be ours eventually anyway. It's better to just have everything clear now. I just looked at both of them. My son, with his expression of complete impatience. My daughter-in-law, with her calculated smile. My grandson, who didn't even know who I was. And something inside of me just hardened permanently. I'll think about it, I finally said. Marcus frowned. There's not really that much to think about, Mom. But he didn't insist any further. They left quickly, leaving me alone in my house with a silence that weighed on me like lead. That afternoon I called my lawyer. I need to update my will, and I want it to be absolutely airtight. Over the following weeks I completely restructured everything. My restaurants, my properties, my bank accounts. I created trusts for my most loyal employees. I designated large donations to charitable organizations. For Marcus, I decided that I would leave him exactly what he thought I had. My modest house and $10,000 in a savings account. The rest, the millions of dollars that he knew absolutely nothing about, would go to the people who had truly valued what Rob and I had built together. But I still didn't tell him anything. I still hoped in some foolish corner of my heart that he would wake up, that he would remember, that he would somehow go back to being the boy who used to hug me and say, "I love you, Mom." I kept answering the phone when he called, asking for money. I kept swallowing all the humiliations. I continued to be the invisible mother that he only needed when it was actually convenient for him. Until tonight. Until he tried to kick me out of my own damn restaurant like I was just some piece of dirt. I walked to my car, which was parked 2 blocks away. The same old car that Marcus was always so critical of. Tears blurred my vision. My cell phone started ringing. It was Brenda. "Where are you?" "Tony just called me. He told me everything." Her voice was trembling with fury. "Eleanor, stop it. Stop protecting them. Stop hiding. It's time for them to know who you really are." "I can't," I told Brenda, my voice breaking. "They're my family. He's my son." I could hear her sigh of frustration on the other end of the line. "Eleanor, listen to me very closely. Family doesn't treat you like this. Family doesn't publicly humiliate you. Family doesn't just use you like an ATM while simultaneously spitting in your face." She was right. I knew that she was right. But a mother's heart just doesn't always understand logic. "Just give me time," I pleaded. "Just give me a little bit more time." Brenda was silent for a long moment. Then in a softer voice she said, "Okay. But promise me that when the time finally comes to defend yourself, you will. Promise me that you won't let them completely destroy you." I promised her that I would, even though I didn't even know if I could actually keep that promise. I just drove home with silent tears silently rolling down my cheeks, feeling like every single mile was taking me not only further and further away from the restaurant, but now. "Get the owner on the phone now." Serena's voice was like a shard of glass ripping through the air of the restaurant. Every single head in the place snapped around. I was tucked away in my usual corner booth, trying to enjoy a cup of coffee, but it was only half gone. Then my daughter-in-law burst into the main dining area, clinging to my son Marcus like he was a lifeline. She was surrounded by her usual entourage of impeccably dressed friends. Serena herself was a vision in a blood-red designer dress, the kind that screams, "I have money." Her jewelry glittered under the crystal chandeliers, practically blinding. Then her eyes landed on me, and her face twisted into a mask of absolute, unadulterated disgust. "What in God's name is that old woman doing here?" The words were like venom, spitting from her mouth, and loud enough for half the entire restaurant to hear. I felt the weight of all those stares like physical blows. My worn gray cardigan, my comfortable shoes, my simple bun. I was the fly in their champagne, the stain on their perfect evening. Marcus rushed over, his face red, not with anger at Serena's appalling behavior, but with mortification. "Mom," he hissed through clenched teeth. "What are you doing here in a place like this? Look at how you're dressed. My God, this is just humiliating." My own son, I thought. My only child. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to remain calm. My hands trembled almost imperceptibly around my coffee cup, but I didn't say a single word. Serena was already snapping her fingers at the waitstaff, her voice rising in pitch with every syllable. "I need the manager now. That woman does not belong here. This is a high-end establishment, not some kind of shelter. Get her out of here immediately." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. The elegant couples at nearby tables watched us with a mix of morbid fascination and blatant disapproval. Some of the women looked at me with a flicker of pity in their eyes, but most just radiated disdain, as if my mere presence was somehow contaminating their precious, rarefied air. Marcus and Serena's friends tried their best to stifle their snickers, but they were clearly struggling. One of them even had the audacity to mutter something about people who just don't know their place. Marcus leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "Mom, please. We're here with some very important investors. You're going to ruin everything. Can't you just go? There are plenty of cheap diners over in the North End. Just go there." Investors, important people. It was always the same old story. I was never good enough for them, never stylish enough, never modern enough, and certainly never valuable enough. Serena continued to gesture wildly, her voice reaching almost hysterical levels. "This is completely unacceptable. We pay a fortune to dine in an exclusive atmosphere, and we have to put up with this? Where is the owner? I want to speak to the owner right now." She pointed at me as if I was a piece of garbage that needed to be taken out with the trash ASAP. Her friends nodded along in perfect unison, completely scandalized and whispering among themselves about the sheer audacity of some people. A young server, looking incredibly nervous, cautiously approached, trying to defuse the situation. But Serena cut him off before he could even get a single word out. "I don't want any excuses. I want the manager. I want the owner. Someone needs to answer for this." The poor kid practically sprinted toward the back offices. Marcus completely avoided making eye contact with me, focusing all his energy on plastering a tight, strained smile on his face and directing it at his investors, desperately trying to downplay the whole incident. I just sat there, feeling like all 66 years of my life had been reduced to this one single moment of complete and utter humiliation. My own son wanted to erase me, to pretend that I didn't even exist. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. Serena used every single one to pour gasoline on the flames. "I just can't believe it. Can you even imagine? We come here to celebrate, to close some very important deals, and we have to run into this? She probably snuck in here without a reservation, or even worse, someone just took pity on her and let her in." Her friends all laughed. That particular cruel and familiar laughter that only women who enjoy putting other women down are truly capable of. One of them added, "Poor dear. She probably just saw the place from outside and thought she could pretend to belong here." The laughter swelled, growing louder and more mocking. Just then, Anthony, but everyone called him Tony Davis, appeared. The restaurant manager glided towards us with his usual air of impeccable calm and elegance. His suit was perfect, his posture ramrod straight, and he wore that professional smile that somehow managed to reveal absolutely nothing. Serena pounced on him immediately. "Finally! I need you to get that woman out of here right now. She's ruining the dining experience for everyone else in this place. Just look at what she's wearing. It's an absolute embarrassment to your establishment." Tony listened in silence, simply nodding slightly, his expression still completely neutral. Then his eyes settled on me. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his gaze. Something that Serena, completely consumed by her own perceived power, completely missed. Marcus jumped in, trying to sound authoritative. "Look, we really don't want to make a scene. Just handle this discreetly, okay? Take her out through the kitchen exit if you have to." Through the kitchen, like I was a piece of garbage that didn't even deserve to use the front door. Tony took a deep breath, and then, with a composure that was in stark contrast to Serena's near hysteria, he turned to face me completely. His next words dropped like a bombshell in the suddenly quiet restaurant. "Madam Proprietor, how would you like me to proceed with these patrons?" Proprietor. The word hung in the air, heavy and thick with unspoken meaning. I watched as Serena's face froze, her expression going completely blank. Marcus's eyes widened in utter disbelief, and the murmur of the other diners abruptly ceased. Tony waited patiently for my answer, his hands clasped respectfully in front of him, his posture almost reverent. I still hadn't moved a muscle. My coffee was now stone cold between my trembling fingers. 66 years old, widowed for 5 long years, A lifetime spent building something that my own son and daughter-in-law knew absolutely nothing about. And there I was, sitting in my own restaurant, being treated like a common inconvenience by the very family that I had sacrificed everything for. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Proprietor. The word just kept echoing in my head, bouncing around like a ringing bell. I saw Serena blinking rapidly, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly, like a fish out of water. Marcus had gone pale, practically losing all the color in his face, his hand gripping the back of a nearby chair as if he desperately needed the physical support to remain upright. The investors exchanged glances, clearly confused and more than a little uncomfortable. Serena's friends had finally stopped laughing. Tony remained standing by my table, awaiting my instructions with a loyalty that only comes from years of shared work and mutual respect. But I still couldn't speak. I had a knot in my throat the size of a fist, because this moment, this public humiliation at the hands of my own flesh and blood, was simply the culmination of 5 long years of accumulated contempt and disrespect. 5 years ago, when I lost my beloved husband, I also lost my identity in my son's eyes. Robert, though everyone called him Rob, had been my partner for 42 wonderful years. Together we had built everything from absolutely nothing. We arrived in this city with nothing but a pocketful of dreams and an unshakable willingness to work hard. He cooked and I managed the front of the house. Our very first restaurant was just a tiny little space in a neglected corner of the North End. We worked 16 hours a day, every single day of the week. Marcus basically grew up among those tables and in that kitchen, doing his homework amidst the intoxicating aroma of spices and the constant clatter of dishes. But he never truly valued that. To him we were just restaurant people, mere service workers. Nothing glamorous, nothing to brag about to his privileged private university friends. When Rob died suddenly of a massive heart attack, I was utterly devastated, as anyone would be. But I was also left with something that Marcus never even suspected existed. A thriving chain of 7 upscale dining establishments scattered strategically throughout the city. What had started as that humble little neighborhood spot had slowly but surely transformed into a culinary empire, valued at several $1 million. Rob and I had always worked quietly, diligently reinvesting every single profit, expanding cautiously but strategically. We never flaunted our success. We never moved into sprawling mansions. We chose to stay in our modest little house in the North End, right where we had started. We continued to dress simply. The money was tied up in the businesses, in property, in carefully chosen investments, not in superficial appearances. After the funeral, Marcus arrived at my house with Serena in tow. They had been married for 2 years at that point, but the wake was really the first time that Serena showed me her true, unvarnished colors. While I was standing there, weeping beside my husband's coffin, I distinctly overheard her whispering to one of her friends, "Poor Marcus. Now he's going to be stuck taking care of the old woman. She probably can't even afford to support herself." Those words pierced me like a shard of glass, but I was too overwhelmed by grief to confront her at that moment. Marcus didn't say a word. He didn't defend me, and he didn't contradict her. He simply nodded, looking utterly resigned to his fate, as if I truly was a burden that he was now doomed to carry for the rest of his days. The months that followed were incredibly revealing, to say the least. Marcus only ever bothered to visit when he needed money. "Mom, I have so many expenses. The condo, the car. Serena wants to completely redecorate." And I, like a fool, always gave him what he wanted. $500 here, $1,000 there. He never once asked where the money was coming from. He just blindly assumed that it was Rob's savings, or some kind of small widow's pension, something insignificant that would inevitably run out. I never told him about the restaurants. I honestly don't even know why I kept it a secret for so long. Maybe I somehow sensed that knowing the truth would fundamentally alter the dynamic of our relationship. Maybe I wanted to desperately cling to the last tangible piece of Rob that I had left. Or maybe deep down, I already knew that my son didn't truly love me for who I was, but only for what he could extract from me. Serena, of course, only made everything 10 times worse. She came from a family with money, Or at least that's what she constantly led everyone to believe. Her father had businesses. Her mother organized charity events. Serena had attended expensive private schools and traveled extensively throughout Europe. To her, I was just the embarrassing. From the last vestiges of hope I had left. The following days were strange. Marcus didn't call to apologize, to explain, or even to ask for more money. Nothing. It was as if that night at the restaurant had never happened, as if publicly throwing me out was so normal it didn't even warrant a follow-up conversation. I continued my routine, discreetly visiting my other restaurants, reviewing financial reports, and meeting with managers in private offices where no one saw me. On the outside, I was still Eleanor, the simple widow. On the inside, I felt like a building with increasingly deep cracks, one about to collapse at any moment. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the incident, Brenda came to my house with information. She sat across from me in my small living room, her face grim. "You need to know something." My niece, the one in PR, told me more details. My stomach tightened. Marcus and Serena are in serious, major financial trouble. I leaned forward, my heart racing. What kind of trouble? Brenda pulled out her phone, showing me screenshots. They've accumulated over $200,000 in debt, maxed out credit cards, personal loans, all to maintain that lifestyle they show off on social media. The figure hit me like a punch to the gut. How is that possible? Brenda continued, her voice hard. European trips they post on Instagram, that exclusive condo in Midtown that costs $4,000 a month in rent, Marcus's sports car, Serena's designer clothes, the elaborate parties. It's all a front, Eleanor. It's all debt. They are broke. I leaned back on the sofa, trying to process the information. All this time, while they treated me like a beggar, they were sinking financially. All that arrogance, that contempt, was built on a mountain of lies and credit. There's more, Brenda added, and her tone grew even darker. The restaurant plan is real, but they have no capital. They are desperate to get investors. That's why they were at your restaurant that day with those people. They were potential investors Serena was trying to impress. Everything made sense now. The exaggerated hysteria, the need to expel me. I had ruined their carefully constructed image of a sophisticated, successful couple. A poor mother-in-law didn't fit the narrative they were selling. But here's the worst part. Brenda hesitated, as if the next words pained her to say. My niece overheard Serena talking to a friend. She said that when you died, they were going to sell your house immediately. That with that money they could pay off some debt and maybe get the down payment for the restaurant. My house, the house where I lived with Rob for 40 years, where we raised Marcus, where every corner held memories of a life of love and work. To them, it was just an impending business transaction. They were just waiting for me to die so they could cash in. Serena had said the exact words. Hopefully she hurries up. That house is in an area that's appreciating. We could easily get $300,000. Brenda took my hand, her eyes full of tears. Eleanor, they are speculating on your death, planning your funeral before you're even sick. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked at my small garden where Rob used to plant tomatoes. 66 years old. Statistically, I had perhaps 15 or 20 more years of life left. But to my son, that was too long to wait. I was more valuable dead than alive. What are you going to do? Brenda asked softly. I turned toward her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something different from pain. I felt determination. I'm going to watch. I'm going to see exactly how far they are capable of going. And when the right time comes, I'm going to teach them a lesson they will never forget. The following weeks were revealing. I discreetly hired a private investigator, not because I wanted to spy on my son, but because I needed to know the whole truth. The reports arrived weekly, each one more disturbing than the last. Marcus had lied on multiple loan applications, inflating his income. Serena had pawned jewelry that she later reported as stolen to collect the insurance money. They had borrowed money from friends with promises of investment returns they never intended to keep. The list of people defrauded or deceived by them grew constantly. But what hurt me the most was discovering something about Elias. My grandson was being used. Serena took him to charity events, took photos with him, and posted them with emotional messages about giving to those less fortunate. Then she received donations from followers who thought she was genuinely helping charitable organizations. The money went directly into her personal account. She was using the innocence of her own son as a tool for emotional fraud. That information changed something fundamental in me. It was no longer just about me. It was about justice. It was about stopping two people who clearly had no moral limits. I began to move quietly. First, I spoke with my lawyers about fully protecting my assets, ensuring everything was rock solid. Then, I discreetly began to investigate the supposed investors Marcus and Serena were courting. It turned out some were decent people being deceived with false financial projections and impossible promises. I considered contacting them, warning them, but Brenda stopped me. Not yet. You need the perfect moment, the moment where the impact is maximum. Meanwhile, Marcus finally called me. 3 weeks had passed since the restaurant incident. His voice sounded strained, like he was under immense pressure. Mom, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. My heart, that foolish organ that still wanted to believe in miracles, skipped a beat. Are you and Elias okay? There was a pause. Yeah, we're fine. I just need to see you. Can I come by tomorrow? I accepted, of course. I cooked his favorite meal, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, the works. I cleaned the house, trying to make it feel welcoming. A part of me still hoped he would come to apologize, to acknowledge what he had done, to say those magic words. I'm sorry, Mom. He arrived punctually but alone. No Serena, no Elias. He sat in the same spot where he had told me weeks earlier that I was a burden, right on the edge of the sofa. This time his body language was different. Nervous, restless, he wouldn't make eye contact. Mom, I need your help. No, how are you? No apology for the restaurant, just I need. What's wrong, son? He rubbed his face, a clear gesture of stress and desperation. I have temporary liquidity problems, about $500,000. It's for an investment opportunity one can't pass up. I'll pay you back in 3 months with interest if you want. 3 times more than he had ever asked for. $500,000 is a lot of money, Marcus. He leaned forward, his voice acquiring that manipulative tone I now recognized all too well. Mom, it's a unique opportunity. I'm going to triple that investment. I could finally give you a better life. Get you out of this house. Move you somewhere more comfortable. Move me as if I were a package that needed to be relocated, a piece of furniture to be rearranged. And if I don't have that amount? His expression hardened. Mom, I know you have savings. Dad was cautious. There must be something. You can take out a loan against the house if you have to. Against my house. He wanted me to mortgage my home, the only security I had, to give him money he would never return. Let me think about it, I finally said, and his face contorted in frustration. There's no time to think. I need the money this week. 3 days maximum. He stood up, pacing the room like a caged animal, all pent up and agitated. You always do this. You always complicate things. Just tell me yes. It's simple. I really looked at him, truly saw him. My son, the baby I breastfed. The child I nursed when he was sick. The teenager whose dreams I supported unconditionally. And I found nothing of that child in the man in front of me. I need to think about it, I repeated, firmer this time. He scoffed, grabbed his jacket and made for the door. Fine, but don't make me beg. I don't have time for drama. He slammed the door shut, the sound echoing through the house. I remained sitting in my empty living room, the food I had prepared untouched in the kitchen, growing cold, and I made a decision. It was time to stop being a victim. It was time for Marcus and Serena to face the consequences of their actions, to finally be held accountable for their lies and manipulations. I picked up the phone. I need your help organizing something that will change everything. His response was immediate. Whatever you need, Mrs. Johnson, whatever it is. The plan began to take shape, and this time I wasn't backing down. I was done being passive. Over the next 3 days, I worked in silence, meticulously planning every detail. Tony and I met in the administrative office of my flagship restaurant, the one Rob and I had designed together 20 years ago. It was our pride, the most elegant in the entire chain. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls with a stunning view of the city skyline. A cutting-edge kitchen that could handle anything. A wine list that competed with the best European establishments. And absolutely no one in my family knew it was mine. Mrs. Johnson, Tony said, sitting across from me with a folder full of documents, a pen resting in his hand. I need you to explain exactly what you want to achieve because I can arrange anything you ask, but I need to understand the final goal, what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. I leaned back in the leather chair, the same one Rob used to sit in to review menus and accounts, a wave of nostalgia washing over me. I want Marcus and Serena to see who I truly am, but not privately. I need it to be public, irreversible. I need the blow to be so strong that they can't deny it or minimize it afterward. Tony nodded slowly, his brow furrowed in thought. Are you sure? Once your identity is revealed, everything will change, not just with them, but with your whole life. I thought for a moment. My quiet life, my comfortable anonymity, all of that would disappear. But what was the point of that tranquility if it came at the cost of constant humiliation, of being treated like I was worthless? I'm sure, I said finally. It's time for my son to learn that respect is not optional. It's not something you can just choose to give or withhold based on your own whims. Tony opened the folder, showing me calendars and lists. According to my contacts, Marcus and Serena have scheduled a crucial dinner for this Friday. They are bringing their potential investors here, to this restaurant specifically. It's their last chance to get the capital they need. If they don't succeed, their restaurant plan collapses. Perfect. It was almost too perfect, like something out of a movie. How did you get that information? Tony smiled slightly, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Serena made the reservation 2 weeks ago for 8 people. She requested the main table, the one in the center of the room, right under the chandelier. She wants everyone to see their meeting. She wants to stage a spectacle of success, to put on a show for these investors. Of course she does. Everything with Serena was a performance, a carefully constructed illusion. Everything was a facade, a way to impress others and hide the truth. Then here is my plan, I said, leaning forward, my voice low and determined. I'm going to be here that night, at my usual corner table, dressed as always, simple, invisible. I'm going to let everything unfold naturally. I'm going to sit back and watch the fireworks. Tony frowned, a look of concern on his face. And if they try to kick you out again, if what happened 3 weeks ago repeats itself? If they try to humiliate you in front of these people? I smiled, and it was a smile that held no warmth, no forgiveness. It was a cold, steely smile that spoke of retribution. I hope they try to kick me out in front of their investors. I hope they humiliate me one more time. And then, only then, you will reveal exactly who I am, but not with simple words. I want you to bring the deeds, the business registrations, the property documents. I want physical evidence they cannot refute, proof that cannot be denied. Tony looked at me with a mix of admiration and concern. His eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. Mrs. Johnson, this is going to destroy them. Especially in front of people they are trying to do business with. This could ruin their lives. I felt a twinge of pain in my chest, a pang of maternal guilt. I was a mother after all, and it was hard to imagine intentionally hurting my own child, even one who had caused me so much pain. But I clenched it, pushing it deep inside, reminding myself of all the ways they had hurt me, of all the lies they had told. They destroyed me first, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Every day, with every slight, with every humiliation, they destroyed me slowly, thinking I was too weak or too foolish to notice, thinking I would just passively accept their abuse. It is time for them to face real consequences for their actions. We spent the next few hours refining every detail, making sure everything was perfect. Tony would discreetly contact some of the investors, not to reveal anything, but to ensure they actually attended, to confirm their reservations and make sure they would be there to witness the whole thing. I would coordinate with my lawyers to have certified copies of all relevant documents, making sure everything was legally sound. On Wednesday, Marcus called again. His voice sounded desperate, teetering on the edge of panic. Mom, the 3 days are up. Do you have the money? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew was coming. No, Marcus, I am not giving you $500,000. Silence. Then his voice became dangerously low, a clear sign that he was losing control. You're telling me no? It was the first time in my life I had directly denied him money. The first time I had stood my ground and refused to give in to his demands. That's right. I cannot give you that amount. I heard his quickened breath, the sound of his frustration and rage building. You can't or you won't. There's a difference. His tone was accusatory, furious, as if I had personally betrayed him. Mom, I've asked very little of you over the years. I've never demanded anything. And the one time I really need something important, you turn your back on me. Very little? I questioned, my voice rising in disbelief. Years of thousands of dollars in loans he never repaid. Years of bailing him out of trouble, years of being his personal piggy bank, and he called it very little. My decision is final. Marcus exploded, all pretense of civility gone. This is unbelievable. You're my mother. You're supposed to support me, but it's always been like this, selfish, thinking only of yourself. Dad was the generous one. You just hoard and accumulate like a miser. I, who had given him every dime he asked for, I, who would have given my life for him without hesitation, was now being accused of being selfish and miserly. I'm sorry you see it that way, I said, my voice trembling but firm. Marcus, if you genuinely need help, we can talk about other options. I can help you budget, consolidate debt, find a financial advisor. I don't need your poor people's advice, he interrupted venomously, his words dripping with contempt. I needed that money and you failed me as always. The line cut off, leaving me staring blankly at the phone in my hand, feeling the last threads of hope break completely. Any lingering illusions I had about my son were now shattered. I called Brenda, my voice barely a whisper, choked with emotion. I did it. I told him no. She exhaled in relief, a weight lifting off her shoulders. Good Eleanor. I'm proud of you. I know it was hard. Hard. It didn't even begin to describe the pain I felt. It was like amputating a part of my soul, tearing away a piece of myself, but it was necessary. It was the only way to move forward. Friday is the day, I told her. The day everything changes. Brenda promised to be nearby in case I needed her, offering her unwavering support. I spent the following days in a strange calm, a sense of resigned acceptance. I knew a storm was coming, but for the first time in years, I was the one controlling it. I was the one directing the forces that would soon be unleashed. Friday arrived, overcast and cold, a fitting reflection of the turmoil brewing inside me. I dressed in my usual clothes, gray slacks, a cream-colored cardigan, comfortable shoes, nothing special, nothing that would draw attention. I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving. 66 years looked back at me. Wrinkles around my eyes, hair more silver than brown, hands marked by decades of work, each line and blemish a testament to a life lived. This was me, Eleanor. Not the powerful businesswoman, not the owner of a culinary empire. Just me. A woman who had loved and lost, who had been hurt and betrayed, but who was now ready to fight back. And finally, after years of hiding, I was going to let both versions merge, to reveal the truth to the world. I drove to the restaurant, my heart pounding loudly, a mixture of fear and anticipation churning in my stomach. I arrived early at 7 p.m. Marcus's reservation was for 8:30 p.m. Tony greeted me at the private entrance, his expression serious and focused. Everything is ready, Mrs. Johnson. The documents are in my office, secured and ready to go. The key staff knows what to do when you give the signal. I nodded, not trusting my voice, afraid that I would break down if I tried to speak. He led me to my usual table, that quiet corner from where I could see the entire restaurant without being the center of attention, a place where I could observe without being observed. I ordered only tea. I couldn't eat, my stomach was a knot of nerves and anticipation. I watched as the restaurant gradually filled up, the sounds of laughter and conversation growing louder. Elegant couples dressed to the nines, business groups discussing deals, family celebrations filled with joy, normal life unfolding while I waited for the moment that would change my life forever. At 8:20 p.m. the main doors opened and there he was, my son. Marcus walked in with Serena on his arm, followed by 6 people in expensive suits, the investors. Serena wore an emerald green dress that probably cost more than my car. A dazzling display of wealth and extravagance. Dazzling jewelry, perfect makeup. She looked every bit the part of a successful socialite. Marcus, impeccable as always, smiling with that fake confidence he had perfected over the years. A mask he wore to hide his insecurities and deceptions. They didn't see me, not yet. I was just another face in the crowd. An invisible presence in the background. Tony greeted them personally. His demeanor professional and courteous. He led them to the central table exactly as Serena had requested, the table where everyone could see them, where they could shine, where they could put on their show. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. The show was about to begin, and I had a front row seat. I watched them from my corner as they settled at the central table. Serena was in her element, laughing too loudly, touching the investors' arms with calculated familiarity, using her charm and beauty to manipulate them. Marcus spread out folders with financial projections, pointing to graphs with rehearsed enthusiasm, trying to convince them that his restaurant was a sure thing. I recognized 2 of the investors from the photos my investigator had collected, serious business people with real capital, the kind of people who could make or break a project with a single decision. Serena immediately ordered champagne, the most expensive on the menu, Cristal, without even consulting Marcus. I saw him hesitate for a second at the price, a flicker of concern crossing his face, but Serena ignored him, waving away his concerns. Only the best for tonight, she declared, her voice loud enough to reach my corner. We're celebrating the start of something great. 20 minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. I sipped my tea slowly, barely breathing, my senses on high alert. Then it happened. Serena got up to go to the restroom, walking on those impossibly high heels that made her look more like a model than a real person. Her path led her directly in front of my table. Our eyes met. I saw her eyes widen in shock, then narrow with instant fury, her expression hardening into a mask of contempt. She stopped dead in her tracks, her mouth forming a hard line. She quickly walked back to her table, leaning down to whisper something to Marcus, her words sharp and accusatory. I watched him turn his head, searching for me, his eyes scanning the room. When he found me, his expression cycled through several emotions: surprise, shame, and finally anger. He rose from the table, apologizing to the investors with a tight smile, trying to maintain his composure. He walked toward me with rigid steps, Serena following him like an angry shadow, her face contorted with rage. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my hand still around my teacup, refusing to show any sign of fear. Marcus reached my table, his voice low but vibrating with contained rage, barely controlled. "Mom, what are you doing here?" As if I needed permission to exist in public spaces, as if I had no right to be there. "I'm having dinner," I said simply, my voice calm and even. Serena leaned over the table, her eyes like knives, her gaze piercing. "Seriously? After you refused to help your own son, you come here to spend money? Do you even know how much this place costs?" In fact, I knew exactly down to the last penny. Marcus nervously looked toward their table, where the investors watched the scene with evident curiosity, their expressions a mixture of amusement and concern. "Mom, this is very important to me. Please don't ruin this night. You can just leave." Every word was a slap, a deliberate attempt to hurt me, but I had come too far to back down now. "I have the right to be here like any customer," I said, standing my ground. Serena laughed, that cruel, dismissive sound I knew too well, a sound that always preceded some sort of attack. "Customer, please. I bet you can't even afford the cheapest dish on the menu." She turned, looking for a waiter, snapping her fingers impatiently. "Excuse me, we need to speak to the manager. There's a situation that requires immediate attention." The waiter, a young man named Javier, who had worked with me for 3 years, looked at me discreetly, his eyes filled with concern. I gave him an almost imperceptible nod, a silent signal to continue with the plan. "Right away, ma'am," he said professionally, walking away to alert Tony. Marcus rubbed his forehead, his body language screaming stress and anxiety. Mom, please, I'm begging you. These investors are my only chance. If I close this deal, I can pay you back all the money I've asked for, but I need you to leave now. All the money, as if he ever intended to return it. Serena was no longer trying to be discreet. Her voice rose several decibels, becoming shrill and accusatory. This is ridiculous. First, she shows up at our favorite restaurant weeks ago, embarrassing us in front of friends. Now this, it's like she's stalking us. Stalking? I was the stalker for existing in the same space as them, for daring to be present in their carefully constructed world. Nearby diners began to turn around, murmurs filling the air. The sounds of conversation fading as everyone focused on the drama unfolding before them. A couple at the next table whispered as they watched us, their faces filled with a mixture of shock and fascination. An older man shook his head, clearly disapproving of the spectacle. Marcus noticed the growing attention and became even more nervous. His face flushed with embarrassment. Serena, lower your voice. But she was in full-on performative indignation mode, reveling in the drama. Lower my voice? Why? I'm tired of having to deal with this situation. Your mother doesn't understand boundaries. She doesn't understand her place. My place. The implication was clear. I belonged in the shadows, out of sight, invisible and silent. I took a deep breath, feeling every fiber of my being want to scream the truth right there, to expose their lies and deceptions to the world. But I held back, clinging to the plan, knowing that the timing had to be perfect. Not yet. Tony then appeared, walking with his quiet authority, his presence commanding attention. Good evening. I understand there is an inconvenience. Serena lunged at him like a predator on prey, her voice dripping with venom. Yes, there is a huge inconvenience. This woman, she pointed at me as if I were evidence in a trial, shouldn't be here. She's causing trouble. She's harassing my husband and me during a crucial business dinner. I need you to remove her immediately. Tony looked at me, his expression perfectly neutral, giving nothing away. Has the madam caused any disturbance? Serena scoffed with disbelief, her eyes wide with outrage. Disturbance? Her presence alone is the disturbance. Look at how she's dressed. This is a high-end restaurant. You have dress codes. You have standards. Tony consulted a tablet, pretending to check something, stalling for time. According to our records, the madam is a regular customer. She has dined here on multiple occasions without incident. That only infuriated Serena more, fueling her rage. I don't care how many times she's been here. She probably pays with coupons or promotions. We are real customers. We spend real money here. The investors at the central table were now completely focused on the scene, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. One of them, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair, Mr. Arthur Davies, stood up and walked toward us, his gaze unwavering. Marcus, is there a problem? His voice was deep, authoritative, commanding respect. Marcus quickly turned around, his fake smile instantly reappearing, plastered on his face like a mask. No, Mr. Davies, just a minor family misunderstanding. It's being resolved. Mr. Davies observed me curiously, his eyes assessing me with a discerning gaze. Then he looked back at Marcus, his expression unreadable. Family? Serena rushed to intervene, stepping in front of Marcus, desperate to control the narrative. It's Marcus's mother. She has issues, advanced age. Sometimes she gets confused and shows up in inappropriate places. We're trying to handle the situation discreetly. Issues. Confusion due to age. She was painting me as senile in front of strangers, trying to discredit me and minimize the situation. Mr. Davies frowned slightly, his expression hardening. I understand family situations can be delicate, but his tone had changed, becoming cooler and more distant. There was something in his expression that showed disapproval, not toward me but toward them. Tony intervened then, his voice polite but firm, taking control of the situation. Allow me to resolve this appropriately. If you will give me a moment, I will consult with my supervisor on the best course of action. Serena scoffed, rolling her eyes. Supervisor? Bring the owner if you have to. I want someone with real authority to handle this. The owner? She wanted to speak to the owner. The irony was so perfect, I almost felt like laughing out loud. Tony nodded professionally, maintaining his composure. Of course. Allow me a moment. He walked away toward the administrative offices, disappearing behind the closed door. Time seemed to stop, the silence in the restaurant broken only by the hushed whispers of the other diners. Serena returned to her table, talking animatedly with the investors, probably explaining the unfortunate situation with her troublesome mother-in-law, trying to smooth things over and salvage the deal. Marcus remained by my table for a moment longer, his face etched with desperation. Mom, his voice was barely a whisper now, but loaded with something that sounded like despair. Why are you doing this? Why can't you just support me for once? For once. As if decades of unconditional support counted for nothing. Marcus, I finally said, my voice firmer than I felt. I'm staying. I'm going to finish my dinner. And you're going back to your investors and continuing your meeting. His jaw tightened, his eyes blazing with anger. You are incredibly selfish. He turned and walked back to his table, leaving me with a mix of emotions churning inside me. Sadness, anger, and a grim determination to see this through to the end. Those words just hung there in the air. Selfish. They called me selfish for finally drawing a line, for daring to exist in a space they thought was exclusively theirs. I saw Tony come out of the offices, walking back with a leather binder in his hands. Our eyes met across the restaurant. He gave a slight nod. It was time. The moment of truth that would change everything forever. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone in the restaurant could hear it. Tony walked straight to Marcus's table, not mine. The leather binder under his arm looked like it weighed a ton with all the secrets it held. The whole restaurant had caught on that something big was about to happen. Conversations at other tables had died down to whispers. Servers had stopped, strategically positioned where they could watch without being too obvious. Serena looked up when Tony got there, her face all triumphant. Finally. Have you spoken with the owner? Are you going to remove this woman? Tony set the binder on the table, making a deliberate, smooth motion. Ma'am, sir. I've discussed the situation with the appropriate person. Allow me to clarify a few things about this establishment. Marcus cut him off, his voice sounding tight. Look, we just want to resolve this quickly. We're in the middle of an important meeting. If you could just ask my mother to leave, we'd be very grateful. We can even leave a generous tip for the inconvenience. A tip, as if they could buy convenience. Tony kept his cool completely. Sir, before we go any further, I need you to understand something fundamental about this restaurant. He opened the binder, taking out the first document. It was the official business registration with government seals and dates going all the way back 22 years. This establishment, along with 6 other restaurants in the city, belongs to a family-owned business group. Serena barely glanced at the document, too caught up in her own outrage. That's very interesting, but I fail to see what it has to do with our situation. Tony continued, unbothered. It has everything to do with it, ma'am. You see, the majority owner of these establishments prefers to keep a low profile. She doesn't seek publicity or recognition, but she's around more often than people realize. He took out another document. This one had photographs. Photos of Rob and me at the opening of the first location. Photos of both of us at awards ceremonies for the Culinary Association. Photos going back decades. Mr. Davies leaned forward, squinting to get a better look at the images. Wait, that woman in the photos? Serena finally paid attention, picking up one of the documents. I watched her eyes scan the lines, her expression changing from irritation to confusion. I don't understand what this is. Tony pointed to a specific section of the property record. As you can see here, the current proprietor is Mrs. Ella Laner Johnson, Robert Johnson's widow. She inherited all of the shares after her husband's passing 5 years ago. Since then, she's maintained and expanded operations with notable success. My full name was on official documents that couldn't be argued with. Marcus had gone completely still, his face gradually losing color. Wait, Eleanor Johnson. Serena shook her head, her voice getting louder again. This is ridiculous. This has to be a mistake. There has to be another Ella Johnson. It's a common name. Tony pulled out more documents, property deeds, financial statements with my signature, Chamber of Commerce certifications, more recent photos of administrative meetings where I was clearly present. There's no mistake, ma'am. And to remove any doubt, he turned toward me, his posture changing to one of absolute respect. He walked to my table while the whole restaurant held its breath. Madam Proprietor, I deeply regret that you had to witness this unpleasant situation. How would you like me to proceed, Madam Proprietor? The words dropped into the silence like stones in still water. All eyes turned to me. I felt the weight of dozens of stares, but the only ones that mattered were my sons. Marcus was standing now, his chair pushed back, his mouth open in total shock. Serena had paled by 3 shades, the documents trembling in her hands. The investors exchanged knowing glances, clearly re-evaluating everything. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling steadier than I expected. My voice, when it finally came out, sounded calmer than I'd felt in years. Tony, thank you for handling this with such professionalism. I walked toward the center table, each step feeling like miles. Marcus instinctively backed away when I approached, as if I were some dangerous stranger instead of his mother. Mom, I didn't know. His voice trailed off mid-sentence. Serena found her voice first, though it came out as a shriek. This can't be real. You can't be the owner. You live in that awful house. You drive that old car. You dress like. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Like a poor person, like someone insignificant, like someone who doesn't need to impress anyone. I'll complete it for her. Like someone who built something real instead of a facade of appearances. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, his face now clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Johnson, allow me to formally introduce myself. I am Arthur Davies of Davies Capital Investments. I must say I'm familiar with your reputation in the industry. Your restaurants are legendary for their quality and exceptional management. He stood up, offering me his hand with genuine respect. I shook it, noticing how Serena watched the exchange with growing horror. Another investor, an elegant middle-aged woman named Irish Chun, also stood up. Irish Chun from the Crestwood Investment Fund. Mrs. Johnson, it's an honor. I've been trying to secure a meeting with you for months. Your operating numbers are impressive. Marcus had backed up until he hit his chair, gripping the back of it as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. I don't understand why you never told me. Why did you let me think? His voice was barely a broken whisper. I looked him right in the eyes for the first time in months, really seeing him. Why did I let you think I was poor? Because I wanted to see if you loved me without money. I wanted to know if your mother was worth anything to you beyond what I could give you. The words came out with a pain I had been holding back for years. And I got my answer, Marcus. I got it every time you asked for money without asking how I was. Every time Serena humiliated me and you stayed silent. Every time you kept me away from my grandson. Serena recovered some of her earlier bravado, though it sounded hollow now. You deceived us. You made us think you were nobody. I turned to her slowly. I didn't deceive you. You assumed. You saw modest clothes and decided I was worthless. You saw humility and mistook it for poverty. You saw simplicity and decided it was stupidity. My voice rose slightly, years of humiliation turning into words. You never asked me about my life. You never showed curiosity about how I paid the bills or where the money I constantly gave you came from because you didn't care. You just wanted what you could extract from me while keeping me small enough to feel superior. The restaurant was completely silent. Even the servers stood motionless. Marcus tried to come closer, his hand reaching out. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I stopped him with a look. You didn't know what, Marcus? You didn't know that treating me like trash was wrong? Did you need to know I had money to treat me with basic respect? Tears started running down his cheeks. It wasn't my intention. Serena interrupted him, her voice now desperate. Eleanor, can we explain? There have been misunderstandings. Stress. Financial pressures have made us act in ways. Her voice trailed off as I looked at her. Financial pressures. I pulled out my phone, opening the reports from my investigator. Are you referring to the $200,000 in debt? The insurance fraud with the jewelry using photos of Elias to defraud charitable donations? I watched the color drain completely from her face. The investors had gotten up now, clearly wanting to distance themselves from the situation. Mr. Davies picked up his briefcase. I believe this isn't an appropriate conversation for us, Marcus. I think our potential partnership needs to be reconsidered. The other investors murmured their agreement, starting to leave. Serena watched them go, her dream of funding collapsing before her eyes. The investors left one by one, leaving Marcus and Serena alone at the table that was supposed to be their moment of triumph. The plates of expensive food remained untouched. The $300 bottle of champagne was warming in its ice bucket, the bubbles losing their fizz like my son's illusions. Serena slumped into her chair, her emerald green dress, which had seemed like a symbol of success just moments ago, now looked like a cheap costume. Marcus was still standing, his hands shaking as he tried to process what had just happened. The whole restaurant watched, some diners with pity, others with satisfaction at the drama unfolding before them. I remained there, feeling the weight of 66 years of life come down to this moment. Mom. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as a broken croak. Please, can we fix this? I can explain everything. I took a step toward him, keeping enough distance to see his whole face. Explain what exactly? Explain why 3 weeks ago you tried to kick me out of this very restaurant. Explain why you've kept me away from my grandson for 2 years. Explain why every time you looked at me you saw shame instead of pride. Each question was like a precise thrust aimed at the heart of years of built-up pain. Marcus shook his head, tears now running freely down his cheeks. I love you, Mom. You're my mother. You've always been important to me. I felt my own throat tighten with emotion, but I pushed it down. I had cried enough in private. Now was the time for truths. Don't confuse needing me with loving me, Marcus. You needed me as a source of money. You needed me as an emotional safety net when it suited you. But loving me would have meant respecting me even when you thought I had nothing to offer you. I pointed at Serena, who was now weeping silently, her makeup running down her cheeks. She showed you who to be, and you chose to become that person. You chose superficial values over real ones. You chose appearances over substance. And the most painful thing is that you chose her approval over your mother's love. Serena looked up, her voice coming out in between sobs. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I really am. I came from a family where appearances were everything, where status defined your worth. I didn't know how to be different. It was the first time I'd heard her sound genuine, vulnerable. But apologies after being caught always sound different from apologies born of real remorse. Serena, I said, my voice softer but firm. You had countless opportunities to truly know me, to see beyond my clothes or my house. Every time I cooked for you with love, every time I knitted clothes for Elias, every time I offered genuine help, you could have chosen to see me as a person. You chose to see me as an obstacle. Tony discreetly approached, leaning down to speak quietly. Mrs. Johnson, would you like some privacy? Should I prepare one of the private rooms? I thought about the offer. Part of me wanted to end this away from prying eyes, but another part, the part that had been publicly humiliated so many times, needed this to be public too. No, Tony, thank you. This needs to end here where it began. He nodded, understanding, and backed away but stayed nearby in case I needed him. Marcus took a step toward me, his arms outstretched as if wanting to hug me. Mom, please give me another chance. I can change. We will be different. Serena and I can learn. Just don't abandon us. Don't abandon them. The irony was crushing. Marcus, you abandoned me first years ago, when you decided I didn't fit into the life you wanted to project. I took a deep breath, feeling the next words about to change our relationship forever. I came tonight not to humiliate you. I came because you needed to face real consequences. You needed to understand that actions have weight, that you can't treat people as disposable and expect them to always be available when you finally need them. I pulled an envelope from my handbag, one I had prepared days ago with my lawyer. I put it on the table in front of Marcus. "What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It's a letter from my attorney. It explains how I've restructured my will and my assets." I saw his eyes widen with panic. "Mom, no." I interrupted him, raising my hand. "Listen to me completely before speaking. Your inheritance now consists of this house where you grew up and $10,000 in cash. The rest of my properties, restaurants, and investments will go into a trust that will benefit my loyal employees, charitable organizations that feed those in need, and an educational fund for Elias, which he will receive when he turns 25, administered by independent third parties." Marcus took the envelope with shaking hands, pulling out the documents. Serena read over his shoulder, her face going from shock to utter despair. "You can't do this, Eleanor," she whispered. "We're your family. Elias is your grandson." My heart broke a little more, but I kept my voice firm. "Precisely because Elias is my grandson, I made these provisions. He will have access to education, opportunities, and financial security when he's an adult. But he will receive it without you being able to touch or manipulate it. And he will learn, hopefully, that money comes with responsibility and respect for others." Marcus dropped the papers on the table, covering his face with his hands. His sobs were deep, wrenching. A maternal part of me wanted to comfort him, to hug him like when he was a child having nightmares. But he wasn't a child anymore. He was a man who had made deliberate choices for years. "This does not mean I am cutting you completely out of my life," I continued, feeling my own tears threatening to fall. "But it does mean our relationship needs to be rebuilt from scratch, with honesty, with mutual respect, without financial transactions involved." I looked directly at Serena. "And it means that if you want me to be a part of Elias's life, it will be under very different terms. Not as the embarrassing grandmother you keep hidden, but as a real part of his life or nothing at all." Serena opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Marcus lifted his face, red and swollen from crying. "What do we have to do? Tell me what to do to fix this." It was the wrong question. "It's not about doing something to get my money back, Marcus. It's about doing something because you genuinely want to be a better person, because you care how your actions affect others, because you want your son to grow up seeing real values instead of hypocrisy." I crouched down slightly to meet his eyes. "When your father died, I lost my life partner, but I thought I at least had my son. Discovering that I was only valuable to you when you thought you could get something from me was worse than any widowhood." My voice finally broke on that last word. Hot tears rolled down my cheeks. It hurt every day. Every slight, every time Serena insulted me and you said nothing, every photo of Elias on social media. Knowing I couldn't be there. Marcus reached out his hand to me, and this time I didn't pull away. I took it, feeling his cold, trembling fingers. "I am so sorry, Mom. I am more sorry than words can express." I squeezed his hand briefly, then let go. "I know, and maybe one day that I'm sorry will be enough to rebuild something real between us, but today is not that day." I straightened up, wiping my tears with dignity. Tony instantly appeared at my side, offering me a clean handkerchief. I took it gratefully, wiping my face. The restaurant remained deathly silent. Everyone present had witnessed an intimate and devastating moment. I turned to the diners, my voice clear. "I apologize for the spectacle. Please continue with your dinners. Champagne is on the house tonight, courtesy of the management." A slow applause started at a table in the back, then spread. It wasn't the joyful, celebratory kind of applause. It was something deeper, more respectful. It was recognition. It was solidarity. It was people who had seen an injustice corrected, pain named, and dignity reclaimed. I walked toward the exit with my head held high, Tony escorting me. Behind me I heard Marcus call out one last time. "Mom, wait." I stopped but didn't turn around completely. "I'm going to change. Promise." My voice came out soft but firm. "Don't do it for me, Marcus. Do it for you. Do it for Elias. Do it because it's the right thing to do." And then I left the restaurant, stepping out into the cold night, feeling like something heavy had finally been lifted from my chest. The night was cold and clear when I left the restaurant. The stars were shining so brightly, with a clarity I hadn't noticed in years. Brenda was waiting for me in the parking lot, leaning against her car. When she saw me, she ran to me and hugged me without a word. I just let her hold me, finally allowing myself to collapse now that I was away from all those prying eyes. I cried on her shoulder, not only from the pain of what I had just done, but also from the relief. The relief of finally having spoken my truth, of having set some boundaries, of having stopped swallowing my own dignity just to maintain a false peace. "You did it," Brenda murmured into my ear. "I'm so proud of you." We stayed like that for several minutes until my tears dried and my breathing calmed down. I drove home in silence, Brenda following in her car just to make sure I got there safely. My small house greeted me with its comforting familiarity. The walls that Marcus had always looked down on, the furniture that Serena had deemed shameful. Everything looked different now. Not necessarily better or worse, just different. As if I had somehow recovered something I hadn't even realized I'd lost. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on my old sofa, the same one where Rob used to read the Sunday newspaper. Brenda sat down next to me, patiently waiting for me to speak. "Do you think I was too hard?" I finally asked. She shook her head firmly. "You were fair. There's a huge difference between being hard and simply refusing to enable abuse." The next few days were strange. My phone rang constantly. Marcus called several times a day, leaving these long, rambling voicemails where he apologized, explained, and pleaded with me. Serena also called, her tone shifting between genuine remorse and thinly veiled desperation. I didn't answer any of the calls for the first week. I just needed the silence. I needed some time to process the decades of pain that I had been pushing down and ignoring for far too long. Tony kept me in the loop about what was happening at the restaurant. Apparently, the story had already made its way around the city's business circles, and a couple of local media outlets had even tried to contact me to do interviews. But I declined them all. This wasn't some story for public consumption. It was my life, my family, and my private pain. Then, about 2 weeks after that night, I got a letter. It wasn't a text or an email, but an actual handwritten letter on nice paper. It was from Marcus. I opened it with shaky hands, and I read these words that seemed to be coming from a much deeper place than anything he'd said to me in years. He wrote about how he had started therapy, about having honest conversations with Serena about their values, and what was truly important to them. He talked about selling that expensive condo they had and moving into something more modest, about looking for real work instead of just chasing after get-rich-quick investment schemes. He said that he wanted Elias to grow up knowing the value of honest work and respecting all people, no matter how they looked on the outside. He didn't ask me for any money, and he didn't try to get me to change my mind about the inheritance. At the end of the letter, all he asked for was the chance to rebuild a real relationship with me. Reading that letter made me cry, not from sadness, but from something much more complicated. A mixture of hope and caution, of love mixed with the need to protect myself. I wrote him back my own handwritten letter. I told him that I appreciated what he had to say, but that actions would always speak much louder than any immediate promises. I said that I was willing to try, but that it would have to be slow with very clear boundaries. I suggested that we could start with occasional coffees, just conversations without any hidden agendas, and start rebuilding that trust brick by brick. And I said that more than anything, I just wanted to get to know my grandson, to really know him, and to be a part of his life if they were really willing to let me. About a month later, we had our first coffee together in a neutral place. Not at my restaurant, and not in their fancy part of town. Just the three of us, Marcus, Serena, and me. It was awkward at first, with forced conversation and long silences, but there was something different in their eyes. There was less arrogance and a lot more humility. Serena actually apologized, a formal apology. There were no excuses, no justifications, just an acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. I didn't forgive her right away, true forgiveness always takes time. But I did recognize her effort. Marcus talked about his new job, one that came with a modest but honest salary. He said that he felt lighter without the constant pressure of maintaining this impossible facade, and he told me about the conversations he was starting to have with Elias about kindness and respect, even though the little guy was only 2 years old. Then, about 3 months after that whole restaurant incident, I finally got to meet Elias properly. Marcus and Serena invited me to a public park. My grandson was running around among the swings, his laughter filling the air. When he saw me, he hesitated. I was basically a stranger to him, but Marcus knelt down so he was at his level and he pointed at me. "Elias, this is your grandma Eleanor. She's the person who made you that scarf that you like so much." I had kept on knitting for him, sending gifts through Marcus even though I wasn't expecting any kind of recognition. The boy looked at me with those big, curious eyes, and then he just ran straight toward me with the absolute trust that only children have. He threw his arms around my legs, and I felt my heart explode and somehow rebuild itself all at the same time. We spent the whole afternoon playing together. Elias showed me how to climb up the slide, how to swing without being scared, and how to look for cool bugs under the rocks. Marcus and Serena just watched us from a bench nearby, giving us our space but still staying present. As the sun started to go down, Elias yawned in my arms, his head feeling heavy against my shoulder. "Grandma, you smell nice," he murmured sleepily. Those simple words meant more to me than any elaborate apology ever could. They meant there was a future, that there was a real possibility, and that maybe, just maybe, something good could actually grow out of all that pain. The rebuilding process was slow, and there were setbacks. There were still moments when those old patterns would try to come back, but something was fundamentally different now. Now there was honesty. Now there were respected boundaries, and there was also a genuine effort being made. Marcus started visiting me on a regular basis, but not just when he needed something. He'd come by simply to be there, to ask about my day, and to listen to the stories about his father that he had never really wanted to hear before. Serena, surprisingly, became this humble student. She started asking me about my work in the restaurants, about the business decisions I had made, and about how Rob and I built something that would last. Not to copy me, but to truly understand the values she hadn't been taught before. 6 months later, on my 67th birthday, Marcus put together a small dinner, not at some fancy place but right here in my house. He cooked everything himself, using those recipes I showed him when he was just a little boy, the ones he'd forgotten about. Serena brought flowers from the local market. Nothing extravagant, just simple blooms. Elias gave me a crayon drawing, all crooked lines that were supposed to be him and me. I put it on the refrigerator, and it's still there to this day. That night, after Elias had fallen asleep on my old sofa, Marcus took my hand in his. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on us, for giving us this chance to be better people." I squeezed his hand back, replying, "Thank you for taking that chance, for choosing real change instead of just empty words." Today, 2 years after that night at the restaurant, my life is different, but in many ways it's still the same. I still live in my humble little house. I still drive my reliable old car. I still dress simply and without pretense. But now, Marcus finally understands that those choices don't come from a place of poverty, but from a core set of values that I hold dear. I still manage my restaurants, though Marcus now occasionally comes with me to administrative meetings, learning the ins and outs of the business. He's not doing it to inherit anything, but to truly understand his father's legacy and the hard work that went into it. Serena started working for a legitimate charitable organization, putting her social media skills to good use for real causes, instead of just promoting herself. And Elias, my sweet Elias, comes to my house twice a week without fail. We bake cookies together, filling the kitchen with sweet smells and laughter. I tell him stories about his grandfather, about the man he never got to meet. I teach him that a person's worth isn't measured by their clothes or their house, but by the kindness in their heart and the good they do in the world. The reconciliation didn't magically erase the pain of the past. The scars are still there, a constant reminder. There are days when I remember the humiliations and they sting just as sharply as they did then. There are moments when I look at Marcus and Serena, and a small part of me remains wary, protecting my heart from potential future hurt. But there are also moments of genuine laughter, of deep and meaningful connection, Of a love that is slowly learning to exist without expectations or conditions or transactional obligations. I learned that setting boundaries isn't an act of cruelty, that demanding respect isn't selfish, and that protecting your own dignity doesn't make you any less loving or compassionate. And I learned that it's never too late to teach someone, even your adult children, that every single person deserves to be treated with basic human kindness and respect, regardless of how much money they have or how they choose to dress. That night at the restaurant was a turning point, a pivotal moment that changed everything. Not because I revealed the extent of my wealth, but because I finally revealed my true worth as a human being. And that worth, I realized, never depended on how many restaurants I owned or how much money I had in the bank. It depended on my humanity, my dignity, my inherent right to be respected simply for existing. Rob would have been so proud, not of the business empire we built together, but of the woman who finally stood up and defended that empire, and herself when it truly mattered most. Today I dine at that same restaurant on a regular basis. Sometimes I go alone, just to enjoy the quiet and reflect. Sometimes I go with Brenda, celebrating our unbreakable bond of friendship. And sometimes I go with Marcus, Serena, and Elias, creating new and happy memories on the ashes of the old, painful ones. Respect isn't something you inherit. It's not automatically given. It's earned through actions and choices. It's something you must actively choose to give, and something you must actively fight to protect. Even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. Because in the end, the only thing we truly possess in this world is our own dignity. And no one can ever take that away from you unless you allow them to. Did you enjoy my story? And what city are you listening from? Let's chat in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.